Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Assalatu wassalam wala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajmain amma bahad. Rabbi zidni ilma, Rabbi zidni ilma, Rabbi zidni ilma. What non-Muslim scholars or famous personalities say about Muhammad, the Prophet of Islam, peace and blessings be upon him and his family. This is a collection of short quotations from a wide variety of non-Muslim notables, including academics, writers, philosophers, poets, politicians, and activists belonging to the East and the West. Michael H. Art, 1932, professor of astronomy, physics, and the history of science, quotes that my choice of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam to lead the list of the world's most influential persons may surprise some readers and may be questioned by others, but he was the only man in history who was supremely successful on both the religious and secular level. End of quotation. The 100, a ranking of the most influential persons in history, New York, 1978. William Montgomery Watt, 1909, Professor Emeritus of Arabic and Islamic Studies at the University of Edinburgh, quotes that his readiness to undergo persecutions for his beliefs, the high moral character of the men who believed in him and looked up to him as leader, and the greatness of his ultimate achievement all argue his fundamental integrity. To suppose Muhammad an impostor raises more problems than it solves. Moreover, none of the great figures of history is so poorly appreciated in the West as Muhammad. End of quotation. Muhammad at Mecca, Oxford, 1953. Alphonse de Lamartine, 1790 to 1869, French poet and statesman, quotes that philosopher, orator, apostle, legislator, warrior, conqueror of ideas, restorer of rational dogmas, of a cult without images, the founder of 20 terrestrial empires and of one spiritual empire. That is Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. As regards all standards by which human greatness may be measured, we may well ask, is there any man greater than he? End of quotation. Translated from History de la Turquie, Paris, 1854, Volume 2. Reverend Bosworth Smith, 1794 to 1884. Late Fellow of Trinity College, Oxford, quotes that he was Caesar and Pope in one, but he was Pope without the Pope's pretensions, and Caesar without the legions of Caesar, without a standing army, without a bodyguard, without a palace, without a fixed revenue. If ever any man had the right to say that he ruled by a right divine, it was Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, for he had all the power without its instruments and without its supports. End of quotation. Muhammad and Mohammedanism, London, 1874. Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi, 1869 to 1948, Indian thinker, statesman, and nationalist leader, quotes that I became more than ever convinced that it was not the sword that won a place for Islam in those days in the scheme of life. It was the rigid simplicity, the utter self efficiency of the Prophet, the sculpture's regard for his pledges, his intense devotion to his friends and followers, his integrity, his fearlessness, his absolute trust in God and in his own mission. These, and not the sword, carried everything before them and summoned every trouble. End of quotation. Young India, Periodical, 1928, Volume 10. Edward Gibbon, 1737 to 1794, considered the greatest British historian of his time, quotes that the greatest success of Muhammad's life was effected by sheer moral force without the stroke of a sword. End of quotation. History of the Syrian Empire, London, 1870. John William Draper, 1811 to 1882, American scientist, philosopher, and historian, quotes that 4 years after the death of Justinian, AD 569, was born in Mecca, in Arabia, the man who, of all men, exercised the greatest influence upon the human history race, Muhammad. End of quotation. A History of the Intellectual Development of Europe, London, 1874, Volume 1. David George Hogarth, 1862 to 1927, English archaeologist, author, and keeper of the Ashmolean Museum, Oxford, quotes that, serious or trivial, his daily behavior has instituted a canon with millions of observe this day with conscious mimicry. No one regarded by any section of the human race as perfect man has been imitated so minutely. The conduct of the founder of Christianity has not so governed the ordinary life of his followers. Moreover, no founder of a religion has been left on so solitary an ambience as the Muslim apostle. End of quotation. Arabia, Oxford, 1922. Annie Besant, 1847 to 1933, British theosophist and nationalist leader in India, President of the Indian National Congress in 1917, quotes that, "It is impossible for anyone who studies the life and character of the great prophet of Arabia, who knows how he thought and how he lived, to feel anything but reverence for that mighty prophet, one of the great messengers of the Supreme, and although in which I put to you I shall say many things which may be familiar to many, yet I myself feel whenever I reread them a new way of admiration, a new sense of reverence for that mighty Arabian teacher." End of quotation. The Life and Teachings of Muhammad, Madras, 1932. Edward Gibbon, 1737-1794, considered the greatest British historian of his time, quotes that is Muhammad's memory was capacious and attentive, his wit easy and social, his imagination sublime, his judgment clear, rapid, and decisive. He possessed the courage of both thought and action. End of quotation. History of the Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, London, 1838, Volume 5. Jazakallahu khairun. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.